Okay, let's unpack this. Um, Imagine New York City on the evening of September 10th, 2001.
Yeah.
It's a Monday night, raining, just hours before, well, before everything changed. And there's this young doctor, Sneha Anne Philip. She's out shopping near the World Trade Center.
And then she just vanishes. Her
Yes.
disappearance becomes this really tragic, baffling layer woven into the absolute chaos and destruction that unfolded just blocks from her apartment the very next morning.
It's an incredibly compelling story, isn't it? Just unresolved, sitting right at the heart of this huge national trauma. So we've gathered a whole stack of sources here, news articles, court documents, bits from online discussions, podcast transcripts, and our mission in this deep dive is to, pull out the most important nuggets, the surprising facts, the key insights buried in all this material.
Right. To help you understand the known facts or what are reported as facts, the really starkly different accounts and theories that have emerged over the years, and the complex context surrounding Sneha's disappearance.
Exactly. We're going to look at what these sources actually tell us, trying to separate what's reported fact from, well, the intense speculation, and see if we can make a little more sense of this really challenging story for you.
So, pulling from the sources, let's maybe start by building the timeline leading up to that final confirmed evening.
Okay. Sneha Anne Philip. She was an Indian-American physician, 31 years old, married to another doctor, Ron Lieberman, and they shared an apartment in Lower Manhattan, incredibly close, just, what, 2 blocks from the North Tower?
Yeah, extremely close. Her background, as reported in the sources, is pretty impressive. She graduated from Johns Hopkins, then Chicago Medical School. That's where she met Ron back in '95.
Okay.
He was a year behind her, actually, and she took a year off to travel Italy, which meant they ended up graduating together in 1999.
Right, right. Then they moved to New York, got this apartment on East 19th Street, and by all accounts, it sounds like they were really enjoying city life, exploring jazz clubs, trying sushi spots. Seemed like a life full of promise.
Definitely. So, according to the sources, on that Monday, September 10th, 2001, Ron left for work around 11 a.m.
And Sneha's afternoon.
Hmm.
This is where we start piecing things together from the sources, right? She apparently chatted online with her mother for quite a while, like over 2 hours.
Yeah, from about 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Her mother later said they discussed, normal things like wanting babies.
I think normal thing.
But here's where it gets a bit complicated, pulling from other parts of the sources. Given some other significant circumstances unfolding in Sneha's life at that time, some reports suggest this online conversation might have been, well, less than entirely normal, maybe even difficult.
Okay. So that contrast right there, the normal chat versus potentially difficult conversation, that's one of the first places the sources kind of offer conflicting views on her state of mind, isn't it?
Exactly. Then security camera footage from her apartment building shows her leaving at 5:15 p.m.
Right. Heading out for errands. And crucially, this shopping trip to Century 21. Now, if you're familiar with New York, this was one of her favorite discount stores, and importantly, it was located right near the World Trade Center complex and the Marriott Hotel.
And this is where we find a really key detail that fuels a lot of the later discussion. According to the sources, she spent $550 using Ron's American Express card.
$550.
Okay, and the specific items purchased included lingerie, a dress, pantyhose, linens, and 3 pairs of shoes.
Okay, wait. The specific items, lingerie, linens, 3 pairs of shoes. That $550 shopping list, that definitely feels like a significant nugget from the sources, doesn't it? Why did the sources highlight that so much?
Well, exactly. That particular combination of purchases has fueled a lot of speculation over the years. Some theories suggest these items might indicate she had, maybe, a planned encounter that night, or was intending to stay somewhere other than home.
Interesting. So it's not just that she spent money, but what she bought that becomes a real point of focus.
Yes. And there's also this report from a sales clerk. The clerk claimed to have seen Sneha with a friend, described as petite and dark-skinned, while she was shopping.
Okay.
But, crucially, security video apparently shows Sneha shopping alone, and the supposed friend never come forward publicly in all the years since.
That's a strange detail from the sources, isn't it? A potential witness who seemingly contradicts the video evidence and then just vanishes from the public story.
It is strange, and let's not forget the weather that night. Sources consistently say it was pouring rain, really coming down.
Which would have made a long walk home, especially carrying all those shopping bags.
Yeah.
Pretty miserable. Difficult.
Absolutely. All of which brings us to the night of September 10th and the morning of September 11th. Sneha did not return home that night.
Ron's initial reaction, according to the sources, wasn't immediate panic, though. They report that Sneha occasionally stayed out late.
Yeah, sometimes with her brother or cousin if Ron worked late, or maybe crashing at friends' houses after going out to bars, that sort of thing.
Right. But here's where we hit another really puzzling detail from the sources. There is mention of a phone call made at 4 a.m. on the morning of September 11th.
Yes. And it reportedly came from the couple's apartment landline to Ron's cell phone.
Wait, 4 a.m. from their apartment landline
Yeah.
to his cell. That's
Yeah.
that's a real head scratcher unearthed by the investigation, isn't
Yeah.
it? What do the sources say about that call? Did he answer?
They say Ron doesn't remember answering it. And frustratingly, the source of this call who actually made it remains unknown. Was it Sneha? Was it someone else using their phone? It's just a question that hangs over the timeline.
It sure does. A big one. So, okay, she didn't come home. There's this weird 4 a.m. call he doesn't remember. And Ron leaves for work on the morning of September 11th, around 8 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
Sources say he was reportedly annoyed that she still hadn't called, but was kind of expecting her back later that day.
Then, of course, everything changed. Ron was uptown, attending a meeting. He heard about the attacks around 9 a.m., just after the first plane hit the North Tower at 8:46 a.m., and their apartment was just 2 blocks away.
Right. So he immediately started trying to call Sneha. Repeatedly. No answer. He called family members. They hadn't heard from her either. He spent the day at his hospital waiting, hoping against hope she might show up there, maybe having gone to help as a doctor.
It must have been agonizing. Getting back downtown that evening was incredibly difficult, too. Sources say first by ambulance as far as it could go, then on foot through all the unfolding chaos.
The building.
Sealed off because of the attacks. No power, so the automatic locks weren't working. He apparently yelled for Sneha outside, and a neighbor confirmed there had been no answer from their apartment all day.
He finally got access the next morning, September 12th. The sources describe the apartment interior just covered in this thick layer of ash, dust, and debris from the tower collapse.
Yeah. And here's a really stark, chilling detail reported. The only marks visible in the soot on the floor were cat paw prints.
Wow. That's a powerful image from the sources, isn't it? Those distinct paw prints suggesting Sneha had not returned to the apartment after the attacks began and all that dust fell.
It absolutely is. And those shopping bags from Century 21.
Right, the bags.
According to the sources, they weren't found in the apartment either.
Okay, so Ron immediately began search efforts, right? Putting up missing person posters.
Yes, posters with her description. 5'6", 115 pounds, 31 years old. He filed a missing person report, and he also hired a private investigator, Ken Gallant. Gallant would become a major advocate for one of the key theories later on.
Makes sense. But as the official police investigation got underway, drawing from different sources like interviews and records, it started to uncover aspects of Sneha's life that maybe her family and husband didn't fully know, or perhaps chose not to emphasize quite as much in their public statements.
Yeah, the sources reveal some significant career troubles. For instance, her residency contract at Cabrini Medical Center wasn't renewed.
Oh, really? Why not?
Well, the stated reasons, according to these sources, included things like tardiness and alcohol-related issues. She was reportedly suspended at one point for failing to meet with a counselor. There's even mention in some sources of a false claim she reportedly filed against someone, and a court date scheduled for September 10th related to this incident.
Wow, September 10th, the day she disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
That certainly paints a challenging picture of her professional life right before she vanished. How does that square with what the family has said in sources?
Well, the sources present a pretty contrasting perspective from the family. They've attributed her career issues more to persistent racial and sexual bias. They claim she was dismissed essentially for being a whistleblower after reporting a groping incident involving a superior.
I see.
And they've reportedly denied substance abuse issues were a major problem and strongly pushed back against the idea that her career was genuinely in danger.
So right away, based on the sources, you have these two very different narratives about a really major part of her life swirling around. What about her personal life and relationships? What did the investigation sources uncover there? Because that also seems to be an area of conflicting accounts.
It does. The investigation sources reportedly uncovered complexities there, too. Mention of potential alcohol abuse, a possibly troubled marriage, reports or rumors of cheating on her husband, and even, in some accounts, cheating with her brother's girlfriend.
Wow.
She was also reported to have frequented lesbian bars sometimes.
Okay. And again, I assume the family has offered counter-explanations for some of these points reported in the sources.
Yes, very much so. Ron and her family have generally claimed these were just innocent nights out. They suggested she felt safer in lesbian bars after the reported groping incident at work. They've reportedly denied she was lesbian or bisexual in a way that caused significant marital problems.
Hmm.
And there are even conflicting accounts presented in the sources about whether Sneha and Ron might have had some kind of argument, perhaps at the courthouse on September 10th, the very day she disappeared.
It's really striking how these different sources provide such conflicting pictures of her life, her circumstances, leading right up to September 11th. It makes understanding her state of mind or her intentions incredibly difficult, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And this is where the competing theories really begin to emerge, all grappling with that critical 13-hour window. Sneha was last definitively seen at Century 21 around 6 p.m. on September 10th. Her fate on September 11th remains technically unknown, leaving that significant gap.
Okay, let's break down the main theories presented in the sources. First, there's the one championed by her family, her husband Ron, and their private investigator. That she died on 9/11 while responding as a doctor. A hero.
Right. Their belief, drawing from their understanding of her character and her training, is that she must have heard the first plane hit at 8:46 a.m. And as a medical professional trained to help, her instinct would be to rush towards the scene, towards the danger, to provide aid.
And they point to her medical training, obviously, and the extreme proximity of their apartment to the WTC site. It was right there.
Exactly. And they've reportedly argued, quite forcefully, that a person's past struggles or personal complexities don't preclude them from acting heroically in a crisis. People can rise to the occasion.
Makes sense. Okay,
Yeah.
what's the second major theory from the sources?
The second theory is that she died on 9/11 as a victim at the WTC, but maybe not necessarily while actively responding as a doctor, more like just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
How so?
Well, sources mention she told her mother just days before, maybe September 8th or 9th, that she planned to visit Windows on the World, the restaurant atop the North Tower next week.
Oh, interesting. Why was she going there?
It's unclear, maybe with a friend, or some sources mention possibly checking the venue for a cousin's upcoming wedding.
So the idea is she could have been visiting Windows on the World that morning. Or perhaps was staying at the Marriott WTC Hotel, which was right there too.
Precisely. And those items she purchased, the lingerie, the linens you mentioned earlier, how that fueled speculation.
Right, about maybe planning to stay somewhere else.
Exactly. Those items, combined with the location of Century 21 right by the WTC, and the fact it was pouring rain that night, it leads some theories to suggest she might have planned to spend the night with someone. Maybe even at the Marriott or a friend's apartment nearby, instead of trekking home in the rain with bags.
And if she was staying elsewhere, perhaps that's where she left the shopping bags, which would explain why they weren't found in her dust-covered apartment later.
That's the thinking. Some sources even speculated she could have been one of the 11 unaccounted-for guests registered at the Marriott that morning.
Okay. Theory 3 presented in some sources. She intentionally disappeared.
Yes. Given the personal and professional issues, a police investigation reportedly uncovered the job situation, the legal trouble, the reported relationship problems. Some speculated she might have just seen 9/11 as an opportunity, or maybe just decided before that to run away and start over somewhere else.
But what do the sources say against that theory? Because that seems like a huge step.
Well, the arguments against it are pretty strong, according to most sources. She reportedly left behind her passport, her ID, her credit cards, most of her personal items. You usually take those if you're running away.
Good point.
Plus, an extensive computer search reportedly found absolutely no evidence of her planning to disappear, no research into new identities, no attempts to live off the grid. And maybe most importantly, she was reportedly very, very close to her family. The idea of just abandoning them like that seems unlikely, maybe even cruel, as some sources characterized it.
Okay. Then there's theory 4. Foul play before 9/11.
Right. That 13-hour unaccounted-for window from 6 p.m. Monday to roughly 9 a.m. Tuesday leaves open the possibility that something bad happened to her the night of September 10th, completely unrelated to the towers.
And the items she bought, the lingerie, etc., could potentially suggest she was meeting someone, couldn't they?
They certainly could. And the sheer chaos that erupted in Lower Manhattan on 9/11, including that massive, spontaneous maritime evacuation, some theories suggest that chaos could potentially have provided cover for an opportunistic killer. Maybe a crime committed the night before just went unnoticed in the immediate aftermath.
And the missing shopping bags? Again, they weren't found in the ash-covered apartment. That could certainly support this theory, suggesting she was harmed or maybe even killed outside the apartment after shopping and never made it back with them.
It could. It's worth noting here, as you mentioned, that some online speculation sources have even pointed fingers at the husband, Ron. citing maybe his reported lack of immediate panic or those conflicting statements about arguments. But the credible sources emphasize this as pure speculation and has not been confirmed or pursued seriously by the investigation.
Right. Important distinction. No evidence there.
And just briefly, some online discussions have compared her case to the PJ Jane Doe theory, an unidentified victim found elsewhere. But the estimated time of death for that Jane Doe, according to the source discussing it, was much earlier, seemingly ruling it out as being Sneha.
Got it. And finally, a fifth theory posed in some discussions. Something about dying with someone else.
Yeah, this is sort of a variation. It suggests she could have gone to a friend's house after shopping, maybe partied, given her reported history, and decided to stay the night since she didn't have to work on Tuesday, September 11th.
Okay.
Then, according to this theory, she and this friend, perhaps hearing about the attack, and remember, Sneha had medical training, decided to go towards the WTC to help, and then both of them perished together in the collapse.
And that could potentially explain why no friend came forward and the bags.
Exactly. It could maybe explain why no specific friend has ever come forward saying she stayed with me if that friend also died. And it could also account for the mystery of the missing shopping bags if she'd left them at that friend's place the night before.
Wow. It's incredible how many different ways the known details, the nuggets from the sources, can be interpreted to fit these really competing narratives.
It really highlights the immense difficulty in trying to reconstruct events when you have so little concrete physical evidence, especially against the backdrop of such widespread destruction and loss like 9/11.
Absolutely. Which brings us to the whole difficult path to recognition and just accounting for victims in the aftermath of 9/11. Identifying everyone was just incredibly complex, wasn't it? Thousands were initially listed as missing in the chaos.
Oh, completely. The challenges were enormous. You had survivors scattered in hospitals all over the region. Communication systems were down or overloaded. Remember, this was before smartphones were ubiquitous. And then the immense, heartbreaking challenge of identifying human remains. Sources noted that a significant percentage, something like 40%, remained unidentified even as late as 2019 or 2020.
That's staggering. And for families searching, seeking official recognition was crucial, not just for emotional closure maybe, but for really practical and legal matters, right?
Yeah.
Like settling wills, accessing aid, victim compensation funds.
Exactly. And when there's no body, no physical proof of death, this process has to go through the courts. In New York, it's typically the surrogate's court that handles declaring someone legally dead through what's called a judicial determination.
So Sneha's case went through this legal process.
It did. Ron successfully petitioned the surrogate's court to have her declared legally dead back in 2004. That established her death legally.
Okay.
However, his subsequent attempt to have her officially declared a 9/11 victim, specifically linked to the attacks, was initially denied by a Manhattan surrogate's court judge in 2006.
Why was it denied?
The judge felt there wasn't enough direct evidence definitively placing her at the attack site on the morning of 9/11. Lots of possibilities, but not enough proof for that specific court.
But her family didn't give up there, did they? They appealed this denial.
They did. They took it to a higher court. And then in 2008, the New York State Supreme Court's Appellate Division, which reviews decisions from lower courts like the surrogate's court, reversed the lower court's ruling. It was a close 3-2 decision.
And there's a significant quote from that ruling, isn't there? From Justice David Sachs.
Yes, a very key nugget from this legal battle. Justice Sachs wrote in the majority opinion that while there was no direct evidence placing her at the site, it was, quote, highly probable she died that morning at the site, and that, quote, only the rankest speculation leads to any other conclusion.
Highly probable, so based on the balance of probabilities, essentially.
That seems to be the reasoning. And this ruling from the Appellate Division officially recognized Sneha Anne Philip as the 2,751st victim of the 9/11 attacks. It's a key legal turning point in her story, giving her that official designation.
It's mentioned in some sources that Sneha's case was actually one of only 2 cases that, in one specific court context, didn't strictly meet the usual evidentiary tests, but were still deemed to have a kind of ring of truth about the possibility of a 9/11 connection.
Right. And it's also important, as the sources discuss, to place this within the broader context of victim recognition challenges after 9/11. Think about, for example, the difficulties faced by families of undocumented immigrants.
How so?
Well, people who might have been working off the books near the towers, maybe delivering food, cleaning offices. Their families might have been afraid to interact with authorities or lacked the formal documentation needed to easily prove their loved one was even in the vicinity.
Sources discussed the story of Fernando Molinar. Right. A pizza delivery man missing after 9/11. His roommates were undocumented and reportedly afraid to cooperate fully with investigators, making it incredibly hard for his family back in Mexico to prove his connection to the WTC area.
Exactly. And remember, post 9/11 saw increased border security, the creation of agencies like ICE Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This climate, according to some sources, further complicated things for immigrant communities who were grieving and trying to seek help or recognition for their lost loved ones.
So Sneha gets this official court ruling naming her a 9/11 victim. But despite that, there are still these lingering questions, these ambiguities that keep her mystery alive for many people, don't they?
They absolutely do. Pulling from the sources, the big ones remain. Where exactly did she spend the night of September 10th? What definitively happened to those shopping bags? Who made that unexplained 4 a.m. phone call from her apartment?
And there's that ambiguity around reported apartment lobby security footage from the morning of September 11th itself. Some accounts mention seeing footage maybe briefly of a woman resembling Sneha waiting for the elevator, then turning away. But sources indicate there's still debate over the actual existence or public release of this specific footage. It just adds another layer of confusion.
It does. And for cases like this, with so little definitive physical evidence and so many conflicting accounts and theories presented over the years, decades later, getting true, universally accepted closure is just incredibly difficult, maybe impossible.
It really remains a deeply human story, doesn't it? A life with reported struggles, complexities, triumphs, vanishing into this overwhelming national trauma of 9/11, leaving her family, and frankly anyone who follows the case, without a truly clear, undisputed picture of her final hours.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, looking at these sources? On one hand, you have an official judicial determination from a high court in New York State. Sneha Anne Philip died as a victim of the 9/11 attacks based on circumstantial evidence deemed highly probable by that court.
Yet, on the other hand, the specific details of her last confirmed sighting hours before the attacks, the conflicting accounts of her personal life and professional situation, the mystery of those missing shopping bags, all these things continue to fuel alternative theories. They leave fundamental questions unanswered for those trying to piece together that night and morning.
It feels like her personal mystery became inextricably linked with the immense confusion and loss of that national tragedy. It really highlights just how challenging it was, and still is, to identify and account for everyone who perished that day, especially those who weren't simply at their usual place of work, or whose circumstances were complicated by other factors.
It really forces you to consider the weight of an official determination like that court ruling, arrived at through legal reasoning and weighing probabilities, versus these persistent unknowns and the many details that just don't neatly fit into that single official narrative. Does that court ruling provide true closure, or does the lack of a clear factual timeline for her last hours before the planes hit keep the mystery very much alive in the public consciousness?
Yeah. In a world that, really craves definitive answers, Sneha Phillips' case kind of sits there, unresolved in many ways. It leads us to ponder what it truly means to be missing when a catastrophe of such magnitude provides a plausible, officially sanctioned yet ultimately unproven explanation for a disappearance.